Welcome to the Atlantico podcast, where we talk about the science behind the Atlantico project, the Atlantic Ocean, and the human adventures experienced along the way. Here, we have conversations with guests from around the world who work together so that we can better understand, manage, and protect the ocean. So let's embark on the journey of Atlantico and discover the world that lies above and beneath the surface of the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. On today's episode of the podcast, we are very excited to talk to our guest, Noel Kok from NEWF. We connected with Noel and discovered NEWF when the project partners met in Cape Town last May during the Port Calls events we organised with Atlantico and with the Mission Microbiomes of the Tara Ocean Foundation. Having discovered what their vision is and what they do, we believe that more people need to know about it, and this is why we are having this conversation today. Noel, welcome to the podcast. It is such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Louise, thank you so much. It really is an honor for me to be here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. So, we like to start each episode by getting to know our guests and to understand their journey and their connection to the ocean. So can you tell us how it all started for you and what your journey has been to get to where you are today?
That's quite crazy because you're saying my journey and my connection to the ocean. I can always say somewhere deep down, I felt that I had a connection to the ocean, especially because I grew up as a little kid during apartheid in South Africa. And we lived only about 20 minutes away from the ocean, but I could not swim. And I also could only afford to go to the ocean like once a year. And it was that special trip to go towards the ocean or go and be exposed to the ocean and be at the seaside that was the most amazing experience, and was only for one day. But it was still the most magical and look forward to day of the year. Crazy in that during that time as well, with it being the height of apartheid, there would be this whole entire shoreline on the Durban beachfront, but we were only allowed to swim in a small 100-meter sort of patch, and they had segregated beaches, and that's the only place. And that's almost where you kind of experience segregation for the first time, because you want to walk along the beach and go somewhere else, and there is a law that says you will be arrested if you do, and so that was my initial connection to the ocean. But nonetheless, it still remained a very special place and a really wonderful place. And then fast forward many years later, when we have gotten into conservation, everybody says that the ocean supplies oxygen. And, we have been told so often how the ocean is in trouble because of so many reasons, and climate change and pollution and that kind of stuff, that naturally with the work that we did, that we wanted to focus on the ocean and see how we could contribute towards the protection and preservation of the ocean.
Wonderful. It's both like I got goosebumps when you were talking about, that segregated access to the beach and to that common resource that is the ocean. From the North Hemisphere, we've always taken it for granted that we have access to everything all the time. Thank you for sharing that already. So, in today's episode, we'd like to know more about your work with NEWF. So can you tell us what NEWF stands for and what it is that you do?
NEWF stands for Nature, Environment and Wildlife Filmmaking. We established NEWF back in 2017 as a result of the world consumes so much of Africa's wildlife, yet a Black African nature and wildlife filmmaker are rarer than most of the species that conservationists and scientists are trying to protect on this continent. And, which was really crazy for us when we started this work. We produced our first television series in conservation back in 2015. And we were the only Black filmmakers in South Africa at that time in this particular genre. And access to wildlife, access to the parks, access to scientists was one of the toughest things we experienced while trying to produce this. It's almost crazy to say that as an African, access to wildlife is one of your biggest challenges.
That's crazy indeed.
That's the fact. And that is the fact all across Africa as we looked at it. And so we thought we did this television series, but we were literally bankrupt by the end of it. And we felt terribly defeated by the end of it. And it was a conservation series about the rhino. And instead of walking away with our tails between our legs, we thought, no, hold on. Film and television in Africa is booming. It always has been. But except in this particular genre, in the nature, environment, wildlife, and conservation and science genres, there are no Black Africans in this space. And we said, what can we do to fix that? And so there was a lot of debate in the beginning, whether we should be a festival, whether we should be a market, and we thought, if we're a festival, whose films will we show in any case? Because at that point, there were no Black Africans that were making films about nature and wildlife. The other big problem was that the narrative about nature and wildlife in Africa and all the films that were being made, Black Africans were always being portrayed as either the poachers, the pirates, the guards, the rangers, the guides, or the people who sing for you when you jump off your safari vehicle. We were not featured in any other way in those stories. And so we looked at this and we thought, okay, one, we need to start changing the narrative. And one of the things I always like to say is, how do you change a story? You can start by changing the storyteller. And so what we did was we established our organization in order to start telling our own stories and start changing the narrative and the way we are portrayed in those stories. But what we decided to do was started off with an event called NEWF Congress, and where once a year we were going to invite filmmakers, scientists, conservationists, because the world was consuming so much of Africa's wildlife, yet there was nowhere in Africa for us to meet and discuss. And so we established NEWF Congress. And then what turned out to be an annual event, we quickly realized when we could not find enough filmmakers and scientists to participate, that we needed to bring in capacity development and fast tracking the capacity development. Africans are natural storytellers, but the barriers to entry into this genre are so tough that we needed to do something to create opportunities for access, break down the barriers to entry, and to build capacity and to develop an audience in Africa and an appetite for these kind of films. And that's how we started the organization back in 2017.
That's amazing. So inspiring. I mean, you saw a gap and you went and made everything possible to fill that gap.
Yeah.
So if we make the link between NEWF, the people you work with, and now with the ocean, there are two particular aspects that I would like to discuss in more detail with you. The first one is the work you do to provide training to marine scientists so that they gain access to that ocean. And the second one is about the approach you have of using filmmaking and storytelling to provide a voice to those who we don't usually hear from, as you just explained to us, and to help them communicate on the environment and, of course, on the ocean. So starting with the dive labs, can you tell us what they are and how they work?
So the dive labs were not a grand strategic plan and part of this whole grand strategic plan when we started out. They were in response to something that blew our mind as we were developing this. So Africa is a continent surrounded by over 30,000 kilometers of coastline. 38 of the 54 countries in Africa have a coastline. And in 2018 at our Congress, we wanted to have a panel that explored whether we as Africans are using this resource as a storytelling tool. Are we telling enough stories about the ocean? Are our voices included in the ocean? And when we were putting the panel together, we just naturally assumed that we would have a Black African underwater filmmaker as part of the panel. Well, we found a lot of Black African divers, but we could not find one Black African underwater film. There probably is one or two out there, but we couldn't find them anywhere. And it blew our mind. And then whilst we were searching, we came across so many scientists, marine biologists, who were at masters, honors masters, some even PhD level, who couldn't dive. But then what shocked us even more, most of them couldn't even swim. So what were our institutions on this continent doing? Creating a generation of desktop scientists? You know, everybody has a version of this, but we say we can't save what we can't see. You know, if we were removed from this process, how do we get a young girl growing up in a village somewhere, or even growing up next to an ocean? Like I grew up 20 minutes away from the ocean. How do we get somebody to dream and believe that they can be a marine scientist, that they can study that when they grow up? And if you look at the stories of nature and wildlife that have historically been done about the ocean in Africa, the way we are portrayed in those stories, it's always only about the animals, or we are the pirates or the poachers and the guides and the rangers. So we looked at this and we thought, okay, hold on. Number one, you know, when it comes to marine scientists, how can they genuinely contribute solutions to the climate crisis, to the ocean crisis, to the problems that the ocean faces, if they do not know what lies beneath the surface of the ocean? You know, it is crazy. It's ridiculous to even think that. And so we decided to respond to that. We're going to start what we call NEWF Dive Labs. And it is aimed at specifically providing internationally recognized dive accreditation for scientists, filmmakers, conservationists, storytellers, photographers, particularly Black African scientists, conservationists, and storytellers, in order for them to feature in the stories, in order for them to give voice to the stories of the ocean, and to reconnect us as Africans to the ocean. You know, our ancestors lie at the bottom of the ocean. The whole transatlantic slave trade, you know, it shaped the entire world, okay? But those are Africans that are lying at the bottom of the ocean. And we need to give voice to those Africans. We need to put ourselves in those stories. And I always say that now there is this big movement of ours of getting more Black and brown bodies into the ocean. And that's because our ancestors are calling us to stand up and be a part of this process, because the ocean is in trouble. Because we need, as Africans, we need to contribute the solutions and bring the scientific solutions. And the thing is, we've always had these solutions. It's important as Africans, like I said, we are naturally born storytellers, right? And very often those stories have been passed down through oral teachings, through sitting around a fire, and through indigenous knowledge systems. In our indigenous knowledge systems, our ancestors have included science in those processes, you know, and if we bring them into the stories of science, and if we communicate the science in the way that we always have, we then will make the rest of our continent fall in love with the ocean, understand that we belong in the ocean, understand that what is in the ocean is it's us and nature, and we are part of nature, and that it is important that we protect it. There's an indigenous knowledge story, and it's about pollution. One of our elders always tells it, where she says, as Africans, we don't go out and hunt whales. But as Africans, we have always eaten whales if they sacrifice themselves to us. And they say that we always used to smile if you see a beached whale and people are praying and crying and pushing it back into the ocean, etc. Folklore in Africa used to use the concept of beached whales. The way it was told and the way it was passed down was that the whales can't leave the Antarctic every year and swim up the east coast of Africa to bring us the gift of life, to remind us about the gift of life, because they come from the Antarctic up the east coast of Africa to the safe waters of the east coast of Africa to have their babies and to remind us of the gift of life. And as they pass each river, as they're going up, along the way, a whale will beach itself and sacrifice itself to a community whose river is the cleanest, whose river is the least polluted, and the most deserving community as they go up the East Coast. That's one way of inspiring people and using a folk tale to inspire people not to pollute rivers.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. As you say, you're born storytellers. I'm mesmerized by your story and just think, I want to know more. I want to know all the stories, Yeah. This is not how we are told. And you talk about, people getting inspired and learning from these stories on the African continent, but I think the rest of the world can learn from it as well. I loved it, really loved it. But if we follow up with the idea of storytelling, can you tell us about the filmmaking labs and how these have enabled people, that were scientists or not, to share their message on nature, on wildlife and on conservation, and of course on the ocean?
As part of this entire process and about putting ourselves in the stories and changing the narrative, one of the things that we looked at, we said, we need to find a way of raising funds to create grants for emerging Africans, this new generation, this next generation. And it's not only Black Africans. We have a number of white Africans who are born on the continent, who have also won grants and made films. And so we decided that we would raise funding in order to encourage this next generation of conservationist scientists, storytellers, to pitch ideas, a burning idea or story that they have. And then we put them through what we call the NEWF Producers Lab, where they win. At the moment, the budget that they have won in the past is like $3,000. We've just been able to increase it to $5,000 to make their first short film. And every year we give away 5 of those grants. But then it's not just winning a grant. They also get mentorship by industry professionals, and they get help with their story and with their filming, etc., all through the way. But there's a lot of emphasis on story versus on the technical quality and trying to make it look beautiful. And because unfortunately, that's how most of the wildlife films look. They all have this one shot where the person is walking and touching the grass and the sun is coming. It's like everyone went through a factory. Okay. With us, its emphasis is on story and about impact and about getting the message across and about giving voices to those who have not had a chance to be included in the stories. And so you'll find that with so many of the films that we have funded and mentored, that they feature a lot of the voices of the communities, or they feature the voices of the scientists, and they are bringing a perspective of the community. I think of some of the films, and one of the films is that a scientist made. She was working with this community and she felt bad. She worked for the park, and part of her job was enforcing so-called conservation practices with this local community that used to harvest mussels. But they've been harvesting mussels for centuries. And now she comes as this little young graduated scientist to come and teach this community how they must harvest mussels. And it was the conflict that she felt in her work that inspired her to tell their story and to showcase that they are powerful and that they have been practicing conservation in their way for so long. And so those are the kind of stories that we inspire. And we've funded till now up to 22 short films. 8 of them are ocean focused or ocean leaning, which is great because very often now we are able to even have a NEWF Ocean Film Festival. And so many of them have brought in perspectives that have been completely excluded for so long. And what's even better is so many of these films have won awards at international film festivals, all around the world. And so we are extremely proud of them. But we are also proud that so many of them have not been filmmakers. Some of them are scientists. 3 of the films have been produced by scientists. Some feature scientists. And so what we're getting, the message that we're getting across with those films is saying, very often there are little young girls looking at these films and seeing another young Black woman like them. And then they aspire to be like them. And it's another career path. It's another opportunity. And scientists are so often so focused on the research and so focused on trying to protect and preserve the animal that they forget that. And like we keep reminding so many of our fellows, where we're saying you are a natural storyteller. And if you use the power of storytelling, very often your work is going to be published in a journal. And how many people are going to see it? Whereas if you make a film, if you make a story, if you use the power of film, you can reach so many. Your impact, the amount of impact that you can create is just immeasurable. And we're very proud that this has happened. And so as we continue to fund these films and continue to raise funding to produce more films, the importance of including the science in them, but science from, in an inspirational way and not in a preaching or a teaching kind of way is critical to the way we mentor our filmmakers and stuff going forward.
Yeah, it's very important, I think, to use the tools that are available, and in the same way that you want to use film to inspire, to engage with an audience that is not scientific, for example. We're trying to do the same with this podcast, connecting so many different voices and so many different perspectives back to the ocean. And maybe it's not about you can't say what you can't see, but maybe we could be you can't say what you can't hear about.
Yes, absolutely. And it's about bringing that new voice and perspectives to what we think. I just also love that it's as part of the Tara and Atlantico partnerships sort of outreach and community engagement sort of programs, that this is an additional element to it. It's not just, it doesn't end when the ship leaves the harbor, and leaves that particular city. And I think I just want to chat a little bit more about that. I think it has been absolutely amazing in terms of the partnership that we have been able to strike up with the Tara Foundation and the impact that it has had in such a short space of time. We always say, so much of our work is about building capacity or creating access or, building capacity, breaking down the barriers. But what is building capacity if we do not create access or if we don't have access? And so, for an example, when the Tara left Cape Town and was going up the West Coast to Namibia, one of our new fellows, who is a emerging filmmaker, graduate out of film school, who's also a dive master from our dive lab last year, was able to join it was her first time on a boat. It was her first journey on a boat outside of South Africa. And she says it best, she left on the boat out of a port in Africa as a free woman. It is so, it's so mind-blowing, just that statement, and we love the fact that she's coined that, and that was one of the most meaningful things for her on that journey. But she was exposed to the most unbelievable science and the way it works and that kind of stuff. And again, it's that thing of connecting scientists and storytellers and scientists and filmmakers, because like we say, there's so much research and it's so important. The work that the research work that the Tara is doing in terms of the microbiomes and the plankton and stuff along the Atlantic West Coast is critical to our survival as a planet and how we protect our oceans. But it's just as important that we get storytellers to understand and exposed to it so that they can help put the message out there. And so it was absolutely wonderful in terms of to be able to create that connection and then to build upon it and to have this impact where a filmmaker literally went up along the west coast. And then, I don't know if you're aware of it, but we then also had a film festival in Namibia. When the boat docked in Namibia, we had a new film festival with some of our filmmakers flew up to Namibia and participated with Kimarudi, who was on the boat, and we did a new film festival, and that's how we must continue, this partnership as we explore and we learn and we have to do it together. It has to be collaborative. And that's the beauty about the Tara, which we felt, and it felt collaborative. Very often science and the science research is very, this is my data and you can't get to it and whatever, but it felt so collaborative and so engaging. And I think that's the one thing that I want to commend and what we're really excited about in terms of what we were able to partner with.
Yeah, I have to agree. What's the point of doing all this science and generating all that knowledge if we don't talk about it, if we don't give that knowledge back to the people who need to hear about it? So, yeah, glad we're on the same page here.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. And I hope, will there be a film made about her journey on the Tara?
Yes, so I was saying to you earlier that last week we were at the sunny side of the Doc Film Festival here in La Rochelle. And one of the panels that we were on is called Meet the Delegation. And so she showed a 1-minute clip about her journey on the Tara. Yeah, at Sunnyside last week. It was so well received and everybody was so excited by it. And yes, she is developing, but it's a longer story and film. It's a story about her connection to the ocean and how from her as a little girl being removed from the ocean, how through our dive lab, through the Tara, and then later this year, and it was so crazy that just before the Tara arrived in Cape Town, we had our very first NEWF Fellow Summit, and we invited Tara Roberts from the USA. She's just been announced as the National Geographic Rolex Explorer of the Year, and she was the first Black woman to be on the cover of the National Geographic Society magazine. And so we asked her to come and be a guest speaker at our summit. And after that, she had made this connection with Kimarudi, who was also on the Tara. And when she went back to the USA, in October of this year, Kimarudi is going to go and dive in Costa Rica to go an archaeological research mission with diving with a purpose. And it's a slave ship that is off the coast of Costa Rica. And she's joining that expedition in October this year. And that connection happened through Tara Roberts. Her first experience on a boat was on the Tara. So she feels like there's something about the word Tara or name Tara.
Definitely. Can't wait to see the film. You will have to tell us when it comes out.
Absolutely.
Oh, and talking about watching the films, maybe I'll conclude today's discussion. Although I would want it to continue for a long time. I love listening to your stories and talking to you. But I have watched many of the trailers and really wanted to watch all the films in full. And I wondered if you can tell us where it's available. Where can the listeners go and find them?
One of the very important things with the films that we fund and mentor is that the filmmakers own their own IP. And they decide where it is and where it gets distributed, etc. The one stipulation we have that it has to have a public broadcast on a public broadcaster in the country that they are from, so that it's made available to the broader country. And we help facilitate that. And we've been very lucky in South Africa that it gets licensed and they get paid for it. But the one platform where you can access all of them, and it's a platform that they've all agreed on, if you go onto the Water Bear network and you search NEWF, you would get access to all the films, and you would be able to watch all the films that we have funded and mentored over the past couple of years.
That's brilliant.
So that's the one common platform that you could find it.
And we'll put the link in the episode notes so that everybody can go and check the films, and also a link to your website so that they can see all the amazing things that you are doing. So I want to thank you for today's conversation and for sharing with us the crucial work that you do. It has been a very enjoyable, very inspiring discussion for me, and I hope everybody has also been enjoying listening to what you had to say, Noel.
Thank you. And I think just in closing, I want to say, even though so much of our work is focused on transformation, we are not excluding anybody. We're asking you to come and join us. The work that we do is also a partner project of National Geographic Society. It's called Africa Refocused, where we're saying, change the way you look at Africa. Change your lens. Refocus the way that you look at Africa. And come and join us as we do this kind of work, because we can't do it alone. It's not exclusionary. We're not trying to exclude anybody. We're not saying don't come to Africa and make films here. We're saying when you do come to Africa, do it properly. We're saying when you are looking for experts, come and talk to us. Don't do the same thing you've always been doing for so many years. They are unbelievably powerful, talented, knowledgeable experts and scientists and storytellers that would add so much value to the stories that you want to tell. And so we're encouraging everybody to come and join us, but let's seize the moment and do it properly this time.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode and look forward to seeing you next time. You can follow the Atlantico project on our website on www.atlantico.eu, and you can also find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. All the links and information on the project and on today's episode is in the show notes. Atlantico is a project funded under Horizon 2020, a European Union research and innovation programme.